My grandfather looked at me with genuine confusion as I stepped out of the taxi and walked toward the front porch. Before I could even greet him, he frowned and asked, "Buddy, why did you come by taxi? What happened to the BMW we gave you for your 21st birthday?" I smiled awkwardly and handed the driver his fare before picking up the small overnight bag I had brought with me. "I don't have it anymore," I replied. His eyebrows rose immediately. "You don't have it anymore? What does that mean?" I hesitated for a moment before following him inside the house. My grandmother greeted me with a warm hug, completely unaware that I had just triggered the beginning of what would become a very long family conversation. The BMW had always been my grandfather's pride. He spent months choosing the perfect model before surprising me on my birthday. I still remembered standing in the driveway with everyone cheering as he handed me the keys. To him, the car wasn't simply transportation. It represented opportunity, independence, and everything he hoped my future would become. As we sat around the dining table with cups of coffee, he asked the question again. "So where's the car?" I took a deep breath. "I sold it." Silence filled the room. Grandpa leaned back in his chair as though he hadn't heard correctly. "You sold it?" I nodded. His disappointment was obvious, but he remained calm. "Was something wrong with it?" "No." "Were you having financial problems?" "No." "Then why would you sell a perfectly good car?" I looked down at my coffee before answering. "Because someone else needed the money more than I needed the car." Neither of my grandparents spoke. A few months earlier, one of my closest friends, Nathan, had called me late one evening. His younger sister had been diagnosed with a rare medical condition requiring urgent surgery. Their insurance covered only part of the treatment, leaving the family responsible for an amount they simply couldn't raise in time. Nathan wasn't asking me for money. In fact, he hadn't even mentioned finances directly. He only needed someone to talk to because he felt helpless watching his parents struggle. After ending the call, I couldn't stop thinking about them. I looked around my apartment and realized I owned something worth far more than I truly needed. The next morning, I contacted a dealership. Within 48 hours, the BMW was sold. I transferred nearly every dollar from the sale to Nathan's family without including my name. I asked him never to tell anyone where the money had come from because I didn't want gratitude. I only wanted his sister to receive the treatment before it was too late. From that day forward, I started taking public transportation and occasional taxis whenever necessary. Life became less convenient, but I never regretted the decision. As I finished explaining everything, my grandfather stared quietly out the dining room window. Finally he spoke. "Why didn't you tell us? I knew you'd try to replace the car." "I probably would have. That's exactly why I didn't say anything." He slowly nodded. "I wanted the decision to actually mean something." The room became silent again. A few minutes later my grandmother reached across the table and gently squeezed my hand. "How is Nathan's sister now?" I smiled for the first time since arriving. "She's recovering really well. The doctors expect a full recovery." Grandma's eyes filled with tears. Grandpa remained unusually quiet throughout lunch. Normally he loved telling stories about business, travel, and family history, but that afternoon he mostly listened. Later that evening he asked if I would join him for a walk through the neighborhood. As we strolled along the familiar sidewalks where he had taught me to ride a bicycle years earlier, he finally broke the silence. "When I was your age," he said, "I believed success meant owning valuable things." He paused before continuing. "As I got older, I thought success meant giving expensive gifts to the people I loved." He looked directly at me. "Today you reminded me that real success isn't measured by what you keep. Sometimes it's measured by what you're willing to let go." I wasn't sure how to respond. The next morning, before I left, Grandpa handed me a small envelope. I assumed it contained money. Instead, inside was a handwritten note. It read, "The greatest inheritance I can leave behind isn't wealth. It's the hope that my family will always choose people over possessions." Folded beneath the note was something unexpected. Not a check, not a set of car keys. It was a public transportation pass valid for an entire year. I laughed. "So this is my replacement for the BMW?" He grinned. "No. What is it then?" "It's proof that I finally understand why you sold it." Years passed, and that conversation became one of my favorite memories with him. Whenever relatives gathered for birthdays or holidays, someone would inevitably mention the famous BMW. Instead of telling everyone about the luxury car he had once given me, Grandpa always chose to tell a different story. He spoke about the day his grandson arrived in a taxi. He described how disappointed he had initially felt, believing an expensive gift had been wasted. Then he explained how quickly that disappointment transformed into pride after learning the truth. By the end of every story, he always smiled and said exactly the same thing: "I thought I had given my grandson the best gift possible." It turns out he taught me something far more valuable than any car I could ever buy. Looking back now, I barely remember the color of the BMW or how fast it could accelerate. Those details faded with time. What never faded was the lesson hidden inside my grandfather's simple question on that quiet afternoon. Sometimes the most meaningful journeys begin only after we're willing to give up the things we thought mattered most, discovering along the way that generosity has a way of carrying us much farther than luxury ever could.